Prospect war number 2. 2 more elite level young players, 2 players that are drastically different, just drastically different in the way that they play basketball on the court. Theoretically positionally flexible in one case, like unequivocally positionally flexible in another case. It's Evan Mobley versus Zion Williamson. Adam, would you take Mobley or Zion moving forward?
I was going to say, let me guess. I'm going first here. I'll
go first next time.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I did think this one out, and this is a little bit clearer for me than maybe some of the other ones that we'll talk about later. So I think we just forget a little bit how damn good Zion Williamson was a year ago. That having a year off, worrying about the injuries and the question marks there, it overshadows just how productive he was. The final half of that season, the final 41 games that he played, almost 29 points, 7 boards, 4 assists, 1.5 stocks, steals and blocks combined, 62% from the field. He's operating as a point guard, a point center, point forward. He's physically manhandling anybody in the league. And I think that you can construct a roster with versatile pieces around him in ways that are going to allow him to be successful on the defensive end. So I'm sure that the pro Mobley argument is going to talk a lot about defense, but Zion is so imposing in every aspect of the game. I think it's pretty clear for me. I'm going with him.
Okay. So the Zion case is good. The Mobley case is based on defense and health, right? Like, because at the end of the day, we have to account for all of these factors, right? And Zion Williamson has missed time due to injury at this point. There's just no way around it. And he missed time in high school occasionally due to injury. Like, this is something that has followed him a bit, unfortunately. Now, Evan Mobley is about as versatile a defensive piece as what you're going to find. As I talked about on the podcast with Cole Huff, the awards podcast, this is someone that I think is going to win a Defensive Player of the Year award. We figured out that we probably shouldn't predict that for this year or next year, given that 4th year is the earliest we think that anyone in the last 40 years has won Defensive Player of the Year. It feels aggressive, even with how advanced he is. I thought he had the best defensive rookie season of the last 20 years. So maybe like we advanced that by a year, but 25-1 Evan Mobley Defensive Player of the Year was, I had to kind of sell myself out of it almost. That's how good he is defensively at this point. He is able to guard like perimeter players and stay in front of elite level guards. He's a terrific weak side rim protector. He's a great help defender just across the board. Like, he just closes gaps, closes lanes. And the other thing is that because he's so versatile and because he's so mobile defensively, he allows you to play 2 centers on the court, which is enormous for a team's defense because you're just going to clog up everything that a team can do. It's really hard to find guys like, for instance, a Giannis that allows you to play 2 6'11", 7 foot tall guys on the court. That's part of why Milwaukee's defense is so good. They have multiple rim protectors. If you pull one guy away from the basket, you still have the other guy there. It's harder to get that mismatch to drive to the rim consistently against a team that has 2 7-footers out there. But the only way that you can get 2 7-footers out there is if one of them can defend perimeter players. And that's like almost fucking impossible to find for 7-footers, right? Because they're just not typically as athletic as guards. So I look at what Evan Mobley is capable of on defense. I think he's going to be the critical piece of great defenses long-term. Some of the flashes we've seen in terms of his shot making are interesting. He's still not quite there yet. He's nowhere near the impact player off like Zion Williamson is offensively. But here's what I would ask you. Do we think that Evan Mobley's defense and Zion Williamson's offense are like pretty close? in terms of like what their long-term impact is?
I think I'm going to give you a cop-out answer. I think they are pretty close. I still
Yeah.
think elite level offense beats elite level defense.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's actually what I was going to say next. That we both believe that offense is more important than defense. It's kind of been proven in the playoffs that like if you just have a dude that is just unstoppable on offense, that guy's probably going to be better. But how far ahead of Zion Williamson's defense is Evan Mobley's offense already? I think it's a lot, to be honest. Zion is a fairly negative defender at this point. Evan Mobley's like a pretty good offensive, like he's not a great offensive player yet, but he's pretty solid. Like he's an above average offensive player. I don't know. You throw in the injury stuff. If it wasn't for the questions I had about Zion Williamson staying healthy, I would take Zion Williamson because I agree with you. I think that great offense trumps great defense. But throwing in the full picture, I think I would take Evan Mobley long term.
Ooh.
And I think we're disagreeing on this one. Let's go.
Yeah, about that.
Give me a rebuttal. Come on.
So the rebuttal for me revolves around the trend that we're seeing in the NBA in terms of roster construction of more bigger, longer, fluid, interchangeable types of pieces. That you don't have to be an Evan Mobley type of player, a Chet Holmgren, a Victor Wembanyama, in order to be somebody that plays as a front court linchpin. That I think the best pathway forward for New Orleans or any team that had Zion Williamson on it would be to have length and size and interchangeable pieces where in some closing lineups you might be able to play Zion either as a 5 against like a non-screening big or be able to hide him in the corner and have the defensive infrastructure with length, with switching elsewhere to be able to make up for that. And having a piece like a Herb Jones, having length of a guy like a Brandon Ingram, being able to throw out, Larry Nance in New Orleans. I think they're all intentional moves designed by that front office with that exact construct in mind, that this is the pathway forward to building a successful defense around Zion Williamson. I'm not willing to bail on him defensively just because I don't think we've seen that yet.
So here would be my question. This is something we talked about on the win total over-unders with Robbie Calland. In terms of constructing lineups around Zion Williamson, how worried are you about his lack of shooting? Because to get Herb Jones on the court, you basically have to commit to either Herb Jones getting way better as a shooter, way more confident as a shooter, let's say. Like he needs to be like 36% on 5 to 6 attempts per game, as opposed to, I think he hit like 35% on like between 1 and 2 attempts per game this year, if I remember correctly. Having Zion on the court, I think makes it harder to have non-shooters out there. You're essentially getting a guy that we think is kind of a liability in terms of defense and space and kind of a liability in terms of floor spacing. Now, his floor spacing is that it's going toward the basket. He's drawing everyone toward the rim, and then everyone else should be open like around the 3-point line, right? Because that's just kind of, or at least there should be 1 or 2 guys open behind the 3-point line whenever Zion is driving toward the basket. How worried are you about lineup construction around Zion? Like having Herb Jones out there, yeah, it's great in theory, but if Herb is a slightly less than league average shooter and Zion is a not league average shooter, and then, you have Jonas Valanciunas, like it's hard to find centers that are shooters at this point, even still, despite the fact that it feels like there are more and more of them coming out. It's hard to find centers that can like really anchor a defense and shoot, which is what I really think you need around Zion. I think it's very possible to construct a defense around Zion that really works. I just think it's harder to do. And I think there are a bit more limitations with it. With Evan Mobley, I don't really see those limitations right now. Cause like, I'll be honest with you. Like, I think Evan's going to like when I watch Evan shoot, I'm like, okay, I think this is probably going to be fine.
Yep. Yeah, I think Mobley's shot will come around. For me, with the New Orleans question, I still think that there's a possibility that the best Pelicans lineup is essentially Zion and Herb at the 4 and 5 in some regard. And you just space it with the other three guys. You put Trey Murphy in a corner, you have Brandon Ingram out there, and you get CJ McCollum. And it's length, kind of 2 through 5. CJ, who's a guy out there on the defensive end of the floor. But I'm going to roll with the skill on the offensive end being able to come through it. I don't worry as much about a lack of spacing around Zion as the primary scoring option as I would with any other type of non-shooting ball handler driver, because Zion is just physically capable of finishing through 8 bodies that are going to run into him as he's driving to the rim. He's going to be okay finishing at the basket. It's just about controlling who takes those kick out opportunities. And if you have 3 other shooters on the floor, I think the Pelicans will be fine.
I dig it. I think that I get that argument. I'm worried about even that lineup you said, right? Like Zion Williamson, Herb Jones, Brandon Ingram, CJ McCollum, and then like a 5th guy. I'm worried about that team on defense. Brandon has gotten better defensively, but like he's not always as impactful as what you would like to see him be. CJ is not an awesome defender. Zion's obviously not an awesome defender, and you have a not awesome defender at the 5, which is going to be concerning just in general. Like even if you have Herb and Trey Murphy out there, both of whom I really like, and then you have 4 guys between 6'7" and 6'10", right? Like that's still hard. I don't know, man. Yeah. Like I think that's what makes it tricky with Zion. And with Evan, it just feels a little bit cleaner for me if I'm building a team right now. And maybe that's me being overly optimistic about Evan Mobley's offense. But like, if Evan Mobley is the best defensive player in the league, let's say he's a top 3 defensive player in the league, because that seems to be where this is going, right? And then he averages, I mean, I don't think it's aggressive to say 21 points, 9 rebounds, 4 to 5 assists, right? Like that feels like reasonable at this point for Evan. If like not aggressive at all, I think like pretty conservative. I feel like that's a top 5 player in the league, like pretty clearly.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a good argument. I just,
this is a good one.
I keep going back to the offense trumps defense thing, and I'm quite okay having a piece like Zion who is literally unguardable, even if you stick Evan Mobley on him.
Yeah, Zion has a chance to be the best offensive player in the league.
Yeah.
There's like that is his ceiling. He just averaged 27 points and 7 rebounds and 4 assists over 61 games as a 20-year-old while shooting 61% from the field. Like, it is not an exaggeration to say Zion Williamson's upside is best offensive player in the league. Yeah, I just think there are a number of factors that push me toward Mobley.
Okay.